that that is a really important point, but I think it sounds from your description you do a couple of other really important things as well. For example, it sounds like you believe the victim when they tell you something, even if it seems far-fetched, and you let them know that you believe them, and that providing some specific safety. Can you just safety planning with them? Can you just talk a little bit about not just the education about the system so there's no surprises, which is really important, but you also do, sounds like these other two things so that you're working in collaboration. It's not just, okay, well, here's the real deal, and then that's the end of it. You do a couple extra things.
Well, and we've been in our community talking about utilizing GPS for domestic violence situations, and that's something that's gotten a lot of attention recently because it involved a new law. And I'm only bringing that up because what it very quickly showed us is that there's so many agencies involved in the process of a community response to domestic violence that it's very easy, until we were all sitting at the same table having a new discussion, we hadn't realized how many times assumptions had gotten each of our agencies in trouble. For instance, if somebody seeks an emergency protective order, they come to the courts. They can be provided with additional information at that point, especially if police had already been involved. If police haven't been involved, then the sheriff's office could be contacted, who could do safety planning. If that case that initially was started by a civil action, which is what the getting of a domestic violence order is, also had a simultaneous criminal action that was being addressed, then that case would first go to the county attorney's office. If it was a felony crime, it would then come to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. At each of these stages are people that are capable and likely to provide a safety plan. But because at each of these stages that's an opportunity that is not set in stone, that means by the time it comes to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and I'm only using us because we're at the end of that food chain in a way, it would be easy for me to assume somebody else has safety planned with this victim. I'm not saying a single of those other agencies has done something wrong when I ask a victim if they've had a safety plan. My responsibility is to never not ask, to never assume, because a victim of a crime or of any kind of traumatic experience may have all sorts of services discussed with them in the middle of that traumatic experience that they don't recall later, that they don't know. This is all unfamiliar. It's a criminal justice system, legal system. It's a different language for most people. And so half of what they're told from trauma alone can go in one ear and out another. They can have been offered a safety plan in a way that made them say they didn't want it. For instance, this is the first time guy's ever gotten arrested. He's in jail. They're breathing that huge sigh of relief I've told you about. Now somebody offers them a safety plan. They have never been this happy. They do not need it. They are 100% safe for the first time in their life. Well, we're all of limited resources, time, and everything else. If they're telling you they don't want it, then you move it through, and the next person perhaps assumes you did the safety plan, and the next agency thinks that agency did the safety planning, and so now they're now open to the reality that the guy might get out, but this person is never thinking of saying, hey, are we safety planning? So I guess my answer is basically that it's very important that there's not judgment between agencies, that I'd rather us all over-offer any service than to assume that it was given in the beginning, or at this stage, or at this stage. It's just such an easy question to say, well, here's the reasons I want to have a safety planning discussion with you, and have them based on the situation as it is now. For domestic violence, for stalking, any of it, the situation can change every single day that the person is moving through the system. And so, yes, it's highly unlikely that any of us could set up a program where we safety plan daily with a victim. Our caseloads are in the hundreds. There's not a reality basis to that. But if every time the case situation changes, I bring up to the victim that it's a good time to talk about safety planning again, I'd rather them grow weary of it and finally say, Mary, I've had enough. I don't want to talk about safety planning with you. I've done all the stuff you said. Fine, get mad at me about it, but I'm not going to do them the disservice of assuming that a plan is in place that isn't. If part of the question is also, what kind of safety planning things do we do? Say I've got a domestic violence case that has just come in and it was charged as domestic violence, assault 4 with a third time. Assault 4 is what makes it a felony, so it's a third time offense and they got a violation of an EPO. Now, thanks to my involvement with all of you, I would know to ask some additional questions and perhaps find out if there's stalking behaviors going on as well. If those stalking behaviors are going on as well, great, there's something already to report. If they're not, I can talk to them about ways they can, any incident, the importance of writing those things down, of documentation, of journaling, of paying attention to what their actual physical and mental responses are to issues that occur. We can talk about all of that, which becomes kind of part of a safety plan in my opinion. It doesn't have to be that we sit down, come up with 4 things that are going to keep them perfectly safe and both sign it. That I see as more of a CYA action than a reality action. I think of safety planning as an ongoing exchange of information. The information that I give the victim about the realities of their case can help keep them safer. The information that I give them about the realities of what they're describing to me can help make them feel more confident about reporting things. All of the things that increase the amount of information being exchanged, there's no downside to that. It's not necessarily going to save the day or make for the best answer, but it's all going to help the likelihood of an improved response or an improved outcome in the long run, hopefully. Because sometimes an improved outcome is just that the person lives. I mean, we're not talking about helping people reach paradise here. We're talking about people that paradise is going to the grocery without crying, So safety planning, it is very, in my role, it's actually, especially by comparison to my past work in child protection, everything was a signed agreement with the family or with the victim at that point. In my role now, so much what I consider safety planning is actually phone conversations that we have, me checking in. A tool I've been using a lot since we've looked at GPS is a danger assessment by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell. The thing that I like about that is kind of the same thing I'm talking about in regarding safety planning as an ongoing process. It's in asking those questions that suddenly you have the victim telling you worlds more about their realities, about what their history is, about what they see differently in hindsight because you gave them a new tool, you gave them a new ability to look at what they considered acceptable and see that indeed it wasn't, and then it's okay to talk about it. So any kind of tool, it doesn't, if you use a formal one, it can still be as much of an information source as what I'm talking about with this, which is mine, which is more informal, more malleable. It constantly changes based on, the new court reaction or the new situation in court or the new freedom granted to the perpetrator. Anything can change. The other thing that changes, risk in a situation very often that changes as we move through cases is custody. Child custody can be used as a huge battering ram by perpetrators. It can keep victims of both domestic violence and stalking that much more fearful of speaking up. The risk of losing their kids or what the perpetrator would do to their kids. And I'm afraid to say that the court currently doesn't have wonderful answers for helping victims that are stuck with that issue. And in fact, my feeling is sometimes we add to the problem of that issue. Well, if you talk about that, the risk is that this will happen. Or, if you admit that happened in the presence of the children, then what if your children are removed from the situation? It's another area I really identify that better education across the board for all of us professionals, for all of what we professionals can bring to the victims in regard to what the court should be able to support to keep the victim from having multiple ways that they're being victimized at the same time. The stalker, the domestic violence perpetrator is victimizing them, and then the court is scaring the hell out of them in regard to what's going to happen with their children while they're already feeling at their weakest and most fearful. It's something that we don't have great answers for yet, but there's a lot of professionals that would want to improve it if we can identify ways to do so.